For quite a few years, people on Facebook, Instagram, my website, they've been asking for the salsa recipe because I always talk about salsa, but I've not done a recipe or a video on it. Today's the day. We used to do so much salsa, like 50 or 60 pint. We had a family growing up, mom made a lot of salsa, and it's kind of just one of those inherent things that we hadn't even really had a recipe written down, and that's why I was never comfortable doing it, because I was like, oh, I don't know, I just kind of throw stuff in. I kind of cobbled together a recipe, bear with me. There's gonna be things that you can adjust and change for you, but this is how we get started. In this pot, I have my tomatoes. It is 1 gallon of tomatoes. And if you haven't seen my video on peeling them and then taking the seeds out and that extra water that's in them, watch that because that's what I do. I take the peels off, I take all those seeds and extra liquid inside off, and then I just blitz them in the food processor a few times on pulse until they get to the consistency I like, which I can show you. I don't like them to be so smooth that they're gonna be a sauce, but I make them have slight texture to it. So here you can see there's like a few chunks, a few pieces, but you can do whatever you like. So you can make it be a little bit thicker, you can make it be chunkier, thinner. That's the point. You can buy it in the store like that, you can do it at home like that. So whatever you feel comfortable with, you can do. So now after the tomatoes go in, because at the moment that's all that's in here, are all the things that are gonna flavor it in the vegetables. So obviously we have onion, it's a must. Growing up, we pretty much only did regular green pepper. It's okay. But I kind of change things up now and do things a little bit differently because over the years, I mean, and this started back probably when I was in high school, I would start adjusting it and helping mom and grandma do it, and then we would do this. So I have a whole bunch of different peppers from the garden, jalapenos, garden salsas, some different chiles, and then along with tomatillos, I roast them. Now, this isn't necessarily needed. You could just put them in raw, let it cook with it. I like to roast them because I just think it adds a whole nother element of flavor. So that's what I'm gonna do here. So to get these in there, you could chop them up by hand. I don't wanna do that. No, instead, we're gonna just put them in the food processor. So these have cooled slightly, and you can do, multiple options here. You can have them kind of in bigger pieces, smaller pieces. I just start putting them in since they're soft and from the oven, they're gonna actually chop up pretty quickly and pretty easily. So I'm gonna throw them in there, and a lot of times after you roast a pepper, you take the skins off. You can take the skins off if you want. I find with this, once they actually cook down, they go to nothing, and I kind of think that's where a lot of that flavor is too. So for this, since it's gonna cook a long time, I don't even think about it. I don't worry about it. I just do it. So I have all the roasted ones in there, and with that, I am just going to give it a couple pulses. That is so much easier, I hope you agree, than chopping all of them by hand, which I just don't want to do. Now, the spatula would be cleaner, wouldn't it? Yeah, you guys call me out on that. I'll listen. Sometimes when you get into a groove and you're used to doing what you're doing, yeah, I do. I use my hands a lot in the kitchen. Because this food, well, one, it's gonna get water bath, so it's gonna get cooked a lot. And two, it only goes to people I love, so they better love that part of me too. So we have that in there, and now we're gonna do some of the other vegetables. For the onion, it's kind of up to you. I like to take it and then take it into multiple pieces. And then that's just gonna help the food processor take it down more evenly and a little bit quicker. Then along with that onion, I'm going to do, now, I like spice. So I always put in what I call a control pepper or two. These are ghost peppers. They're uber hot, like whoa hot. We have heat. You wanna put in, if you want the heat, you wanna put in the pith of the pepper, that white stuff, because that's where the heat is. And usually just from the fragrance, that is hot. So I'm just gonna do one. I'm just gonna do one, because you never know for sure. Also in there, I am gonna put a couple of these fresh green bell peppers. I don't like the bell pepper when they're roasted. I don't think it really helps them. It can almost actually turn them bitter. So instead with these, I'm gonna just take out those insides, the pith, because again with these, there's no heat or anything, so there's no point to it, and then throw them in there. I think the bell pepper does add a sweet kind of pepper flavor, which I like. I just don't like when it's roasted. Over the years, we've done a lot of different ways of trying to chop up all these vegetables, and guys, the food processor, it kind of does wonders. And I have used my Vitamix for it too, and that works also. You just have to get in there and kind of stir it a little bit more with the Vitamix. So with that fresh, I am gonna also put in the stems and the leaves of this cilantro. I'm just gonna tear it into a couple pieces. Now the reason I'm doing it in here, if you would just put the cilantro in completely by itself, it wouldn't really chop up. It would just get pushed to the sides and the blades wouldn't chop it. But with the onion, with the peppers in there, it's gonna help it work all together and chop it a lot easier. You can always check it. This is looking pretty good. Might give it one little stir here just to make sure all those pieces are getting chomped down. I get the heat of the pepper. When you have a really hot pepper and you chop it up, you know. So we have all those items worked together, and we're gonna dump these into the salsa that's going to, instantly I feel like with these flavors, so like now I am getting that cilantro, I'm getting onion, pepper, so you're really starting to get all of those flavors and all of that aroma that an actual salsa takes on. So I kind of love that. Gonna put that back in. We're using the same thing, we don't need to clean it out because it's all going into the same pot. So now it's gonna be these roasted tomatillos. Tomatillos are one of those things that no, you don't have to do them. There is also just tomatillo salsa on its own, but there is something to me about adding roasted tomatillos to a salsa. That's essential. I remember in high school or grade school, I'd come home from school, the house, the minute you would walk in, you would know, Mom's making salsa today. You just smell it. And she'd have me taste it. She always had me taste it because she wanted to know the heat level, wanted to know what I thought. She second guesses herself all the time. And I would instantly be able to say, you didn't put tomatillos in, or you put tomatillos in. And from then on, we would always keep adding tomatillos. I'm also gonna put in there, just because I like to chop it up in there, my garlic. I think garlic is kind of one of those essential things. And I love to grow garlic. It's one of my favorite items to grow. You plant it in the fall in my zone. I'm in zone 5 in Iowa. And then you pick it in the spring, or actually it's like late spring, more into like June. Late June, actually. So I'm gonna throw in some garlic cloves into that. That way they just get chopped up with those tomatillos. There's no right or wrong here. There's no correct order. You just can kind of get these ingredients into that chopper as it works for you. It's just easier than chopping them all by hand. Salsa used to be one of those things I feel like that could take all day, but now it doesn't. So I'm gonna finish chopping this up, add it to my salsa, and then I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so the tomatillos and the garlic have been chopped up. You can tell they're cohesive, they're broken down. Now I'm just gonna pour them in. Be careful not to get it quite everywhere. You can see I'm using a big kettle. Why? Because a lot of these liquids as they splatter are messy, and as you pour things in, obviously there's always gonna be splatter. So I just find it's easier if you have a tall and a heavy bottom kettle, because then as you're cooking it, it doesn't want to stick. Into that, I'm gonna add some vinegar. Vinegar is really important when you're doing cooked salsa. This is different than a fresh salsa. Vinegar kind of acts as like, say, your lime juice would or something in a fresh salsa, but you need that extra acidity in there. It kind of oddly balances everything out. Even though tomatoes can be acidic, you never really know what acidity they are. Of course, cumin. You need cumin. I feel like, can you have salsa without it? And this is one of those things that after we cook it, I will be tasting it and kind of, you can adjust it slightly, add more cumin if you think you need to, and then salt. You need the salt. And we're gonna just pour that right in. So at this point, we're gonna take it over to the stove and we're gonna bring it to a boil, and then we're gonna let it cook. I like to let it cook down slightly, which means condense. You just wanna cook off maybe some of that extra liquid. Even though I went to the work of making sure I got some of the extra liquid out of the tomatoes, as it boils and that steam escapes, it will actually cook down and start to get a little bit thicker. And again, it's a personal preference. I like a little bit thicker of a salsa, and I don't like it to be watery. So I'm gonna stir this together, I'm gonna let it come to a boil, and then I'll show you as it's cooking down what it's like and when you can taste it and adjust the flavors. So this has been cooking for about 25 minutes, and you can see what I mean. Up here is the ring of where it started, and you can see it's actually started cooking down at least an inch. If you're unsure of on your pot when you begin, always just put your spoon in or whatever you're stirring it with, know the level it starts at, and then you can do that while it's cooking and kind of see how much it's cooked down and what you think. It's just nice to get some of that liquid off, and I like it to be a little bit thicker. And this is starting to do that. What we always do at the end when we want it to be just a stitch thicker is we add some tomato paste. And you can add up to 12 ounces. I start with like 6 ounces here and get that in there. And then you want it to cook a little bit while it's in there just because, one, it will help you know the consistency of it. I also kind of like this because it's just tomato paste, that's all it is, there's no sugar in it, but it does add a level of sweetness to the salsa too, so sometimes it kind of just balances out the flavor. You definitely want to stir it around, really make sure that it kind of melts out and melts evenly in throughout all of it. Because like, see, there's still a clump of it, so I'm really going to make sure and like push it with the back of my spoon and then keep stirring to make sure that tomato paste really gets throughout. So I definitely want to cook it about 5 minutes after I add that tomato paste. And already you can tell it's a little bit thicker. The texture's a little bit better. The viscosity is more how I like my salsa to be. So I'm gonna cook that out. I have my jars ready behind me. They're sterilized and ready to go. So when this is done cooking, I'm gonna bring it over to there and we'll ladle it into all the jars. So I've cooked it a few minutes more. That tomato paste really helped thicken it up. It's just kind of a nice little quick, cheap way to thicken it up. So my jars are ready. They are sterilized, clean, ready to go. You always want to check them too, make sure there's no chips around this top here where the lid is going to go, because that could affect them and they would not seal if there was a bad chip. Also, if there's any cracks, you don't want to use them because then they could explode when they are in the canner. So just look over your jars, because if you're like me, you reuse them year to year. You don't always have brand new ones, so they could have issues. So I'm using a ladle, of course, a funnel, and I'm just going to start putting the salsa into jars. Usually about, I think, 2 ladlefuls will fill a jar, not quite. You definitely want to leave that little bit of headspace, right about 1/4 to 1/2 of an inch, which for me is always perfectly right at the bottom of my funnel in there. So I can kind of use that as a gauge and then go to the next one. And yes, if you make a mess, don't worry, we are going to clean up the tops of these jars. And you want to do it while it's hot. This is called a hot pack. You don't want to put something cold into a hot water bath. So you always want to do everything warm. So my jars are still warm, my salsa is hot, so we want to keep everything at that level so when it goes into the water bath that's boiling, it doesn't shock it and doesn't cause, you know, those extreme temperature changes can sometimes cause glass to crack or break, which has happened to me. So I'm going to finish filling up these jars and we're going to clean them up, put the lids on, water bath them, and have salsa that is ready to go. So I have the jars full. The tops of them you always want to make sure are not contaminated. So you want to wipe it off with hot water. I do a little bit of boiling water, dip a paper towel because I know a paper towel is completely clean. Every so often turn it and fold it just to make sure I have a clean surface to wipe the top of them. If there's any food there or contaminant on it, it doesn't always want to adhere as well. So you just want to do everything you can to ensure that it's going to seal, because after you're going to this work, you want them to seal. So you want to go fingertip tight, it's called. You just kind of have to do it a couple times, but you'll get it. You don't want it so tight that it's going to want to buckle the lid. You want it just tight enough that it doesn't want to come out. I had another lid down here that I forgot to bring up. We're going to put that right on top. Also, here's a ring you don't want to use. See how it's bent down? That again can be an issue when it's going to seal. So I'm not going to use that one. I'm going to set it aside, get one out that does not have a bend in it so I can put it on properly. This is really hot, so you probably shouldn't pick them up like this, but I can do it. So my water over here is boiling, and I'm just going to start putting these in. And this is a water bath. It's fitted with a ring in the bottom that actually lifts the jars up so they do not touch the bottom. You don't want them to be directly in contact with the bottom and the heat, because that can be hard on them and then cause them to burst. So you just want something really little that lifts them slightly. You're gonna want the water to cover them when the canner is full, which as we put the jars in there, it displaces the water. and it will raise the level up. I always say follow the USDA guidelines. They have publications out online to check your sea level, where you live, and how long canning time takes. For me, it's 20 minutes for these pints. So I'm gonna put them in. I'm gonna make sure it comes back to a boil. Then I'm gonna set the timer for 20 minutes. And I'm gonna have jars that will hopefully seal really quickly. Our water is above the jars. It's almost back to a boil. I'm gonna put that back on to fully bring it to a boil, set the timer for 20 minutes, take them out, have fresh salsa, guys. This is great. Year-round salsa. It's good. My timer just went off, which means my salsa is done, friends. So I'm gonna take off the lid here and start taking them out. This is where you want a good jar lifter. You're not gonna get in there with some other utensil. So the right tools here can make a little bit of a difference. These all look really good. You see the flecks of some seeds, some color from the green peppers, a little bit of that roasted pepper flake in there too. As I get them out, I just slightly tip them just to get that excess water off the top. Most of it would most likely evaporate as they're sitting here anyway because it's still so hot, but hey, do you guys hear that? I just heard a pop because oh, I hear them again. They are just sealing, guys. They are so excited that you're here and you're watching this. No, that really is the best sound you can hear when you are canning because that means they are sealed, they are shelf stable. So you put them in a cooler, dark place if you had available in your home. For me, I use my basement just because, you know, light, since they're in clear jars, can be kind of harsh on them if they're in direct sunlight. So at this point, look at this. Look at that. I have 11 pints. I have a couple more I can do. So I hope you enjoyed this recipe. It is a family favorite. We make so much of it every year, and I can't wait for you to start making it. So keep telling me what you love, keep sharing these videos around. That helps me and it helps you, so I create more. So let me know what you love. Tag others who need to love it too. And let's all get home and start hearing that pop because that is the most joyous noise to a canner's ear. I'm gonna get my other jars ready.